Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. The Grant. My name is Niels Winter, and I am the creator, editor, and host of The Grant. The Grant is an independent, non-commercial podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. I have an endless amount of contacts from my many years working within this field, and they all have interesting things to share. One of my dear old contacts is Blaz Likozar from the National Research Institute for Chemistry in Slovenia. I dragged him into several of my proposals in the past, and he became a much appreciated contact of mine. Of course, I have invited him into the grant to share how they work with EU funding in their institute. Why? Because this organization has managed to professionally build up the EU funding approach and pushing themselves into the EU R&D networks, doing exactly what many research organizations in the former communist countries are striving for. We have a talk about how they have built up their approach and how the EU funding has lifted their research level, capacities and manpower. This episode offers nice insights on how to build up EU funding capacities in your research organization with a limited amount of resources. Please enjoy. Grant. Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. When you have been doing a lot of proposals throughout the years, and when you have been working within this sector, you of course pick up a lot of contacts. And the guest I have today, it's one that I worked on several occasions for several proposals. And we'll get back to that. But Blaz, welcome.
Thank you, Niels. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and it's a pleasure to have you in because I reached out to you for probably a year ago.
Yeah.
But it's like this. It's and you are a busy man, and it's just like this with many of my guests, busy people, to fit it in. But the most important thing is that it happens. Blaz, can you shortly present yourself?
Yes, gladly, Niels. Thank you. So my name is Blaz Likozar. I'm here the head of Department of Catalysis and Chemical Reaction Engineering at the National Institute of Chemistry in Slovenia, which is the second largest institute in Slovenia. Slovenia itself being rather small, this means that the institute should cover a broad spectrum of topics, are specifically being related to chemical engineering in its broadest sense. What we do here is CO2, hydrogen, ammonia, biomass, and other things related research. And in this regard, we are also, of course, looking for the opportunities to cooperate in terms of consortium type projects. And this is also what helps us to maintain the group that we have, that's now of about 80 people already.
Yeah, we'll get back to that in a second when we talk about the strategy. So today's topic, we're going to talk about chemical research and EU funding. So we're going to zoom a little bit in on your institute. And have already had some research institutes and public project proposal offices from universities on board. So we're going to divert a little bit, talk about research tracks, but I also think maybe we should talk a little bit about the heritage of Eastern Europe, of communist, post-communism, the academic sphere, and so on. But we'll get back to that.
Mm-hmm.
Blaz, your own experience on EU funding?
Well, mostly positive or very positive in this regard. So indeed, we started dealing with it within at least me personally, within the Horizon 2020 program. Although, I've heard of it before, but, Horizon 2020 was really hands-on. And, it's still continuing in the next program, Horizon Europe. And, as mentioned, most of it or almost all of it is strictly positive. But truth be told, it is and it was the case that we tried to learn from the West in all aspects. Meaning that, and as you've mentioned, we'll probably come back to that. We tried to see which things we are not doing okay in terms of not being successful, and then try to go beyond that. And, for example, go side by side with successful institutions from the Netherlands, Belgium, and so on.
Yeah. Let's just move into the topic and have a short fly-in intro to the Department of Catalysis and Chemical Reaction Engineering. You already said a little bit, but just a few more words.
Yeah, so thank you. Indeed, from, let's say, when we started off as a group, which I joined in 2011, the department was, let's say, rather modest or not so substantial with regard to, let's say, the staff, but also on the other hand the topic. So it was mostly dealing with what was fashionable maybe some time ago. So catalytic water purification. But then when me and my colleagues started to assessing the let's say the research landscape changing with regard to chemical engineering, we pinpointed topics related to what today is goes without saying. So defossilization, renewable energy, alternative feedstocks, circular economy, and this is basically where we placed the most important pillars of research. First fundamental, and they're more and more applied through also Horizon program. So the department itself, I mean, it's chemical engineering in its purest forms, meaning that we are designing, constructing, and then implementing various reactor separation unit operation prototypes. We do modeling at various scales. We synthesize materials, and that's it in short. And we tried to keep up with the topics that I've mentioned before. So CO2 related issues, hydrogen, biomass, and so on.
Which is at the core of the green transition.
Yes.
More or less. We will focus on the funding side and how you are working with it in your institute. So first we'll look a little bit at the strategy, because I know, so there's some background from my side. Now, I've known Ivica Ilic, is that his name?
Yes, he's the head of the project management office.
Him I have known for a very long time. I connected with him at a brokerage event many years ago, and I stayed in contact with him. This is why we know each other, Blaz, because he was in my contact list of strong contacts. He's been very active early on, back then when I met him, and my impression was that it was very organized. I remember he had a full overview of your capacities within different calls, and an overview of running projects. So your experience in the institute, which was extremely easy for me to tap into as a facilitator on my behalf for my stakeholders. So it was like going into a shop. I could look through, and so that's why I know that you're quite organized with this. But do you know yourself how, when you started to kick off the focusing more on EU funding?
I mean, to some extent, it was taking some of the burden from our project management office. So, for example, we started to go to the brokerage events ourselves. We started to look for high quality partners, the ones that were kind of complementary to what we did. And it was a kind of snowballing effect over the years, meaning that the network expanded. Some of the industrial partners that were in consortia then cooperated with us directly, or vice versa. Some of the industrial partners with which we cooperate, we try to integrate it within the consortia. We have long-lasting fundamental research also beyond horizon with some of the partners that we've actually met within the program. So it's like I would say, at least in my opinion, it's like a study case that we did there, and yeah, I mean we really enjoy it in a way. So yeah.
Yeah. So the motivation is my best guess is it's like most you have some. You get some from. Do you get from the government, Slovenia government, some funding for?
Yes, we do. We have various funding streams here nationally. I would say that they are, quite, I would say, adequate or substantial. So it's. I think the stable program funding, which has a turnaround of about 5 to 10 years, has about seven full timers. And then there's competitive projects which have a reasonably high success rate, and others. But of course, it takes care of about maybe a third of the department staff. So the rest is, for example, as you've mentioned, European projects.
Now, where I want to go with this is that probably you realized back then that it would be to grow the institute, external funding from Europe would be important.
For sure, it would be that would be one. So one motivation was for sure to grow. The other one was, as mentioned before, to learn. So to not just considering the acquisition of projects, but rather also more contact time, seeing the facilities, seeing what people do, sharing the ideas. I mean, some things might sound corny a bit, but that's indeed the case. And of course, also to steer the fields of research a bit and to align, complementarity, basically.
Yeah. So how structured are you with it? Do you have a concrete strategy put down into a document on how to work with this, or some principles, or?
No, I would say not really. I mean, there are some things that we would tend to do, like, for example, doing follow-ups with the partners with which we cooperate more intensively. But otherwise, I mean, maybe the whole COVID changed the landscape of these in-person brokerages also a bit. So we do tend to attend those, but a bit less than it was before.
Mm-hmm.
But that's basically it. I would say, just maintaining the network and the partners with which we cooperate really well to continue cooperating with them at this point.
Do you have a project office?
Yeah, I mean, at the institute level we do. At the department level we don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how many people sit at the department level project office?
Well, at the department level, there's nobody in particular dealing with just projects. I mean, we have maybe two persons dealing with the actual implementation, meaning just the administration of it altogether. But otherwise, for the we have a centralized administration. So for mundane things like timesheets or financial reporting, this is the institute level. Mm-hmm. But then there's things that aren't dealt with centralized wise, and this we have to deal with at the department. So I would say two persons. Yeah.
Okay. And but they don't help with the pre-award phase, or?
No, with the pre-award phase, it's mostly researchers themselves or ourselves dealing with that.
Yeah.
So, and this means everything from contacting, bid writing, everything.
How does that work?
Well, I would say.
Yeah, because it's often you would have universities, they have support people that, especially for younger researchers, to sort of train them a little bit, and not to tap into the resources of the more experienced researchers within this process. So So it works. So you sort of have incorporated in your workflow.
Yeah, I mean, I think it came kind of organic or natural. So yes, definitely we do pass this knowledge onward to younger researchers, especially those that tend to be more interested in doing something like that.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, we do a kind of tutoring or mentorship, but it's informal, so we don't have anything established. If an opportunity arises, typically there would be a discussion on forming an ad hoc team to address that, and that's basically it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm curious because it's I know how busy you are, and maybe that's why you're actually so busy, Blaz. Because
Yeah, it's a kind of self-organizing structure, I would say. So just people people organize themselves, I would say.
uh, and so do you have do you try internally in the institute to sort of have some sort of body system or some where you with the younger researchers they where you teach them a little bit so they can lean a little bit up against guys like you?
Yeah, I mean, at the institute level, there's various instruments for doing that. I mean, I think that, when put side by side, I think we take care of it predominantly internally, but you would have instruments such as, especially, for example, ERC training, where people would be taught how to approach the ERC proposals, how to go about interviews and so on.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of workshops for European proposals in general, but typically the good old solid hands-on practice is the one that is most fruitful.
And then you have the network. So, well, I know that Ivica he was running around in brokerage events. Do you also do that yourself? Your researchers there, do you do these kind of things?
Yeah, as noted, I mean, we definitely do. If I would compare the pre-COVID and period with now, I would say that we attend more online brokerages and less in person, just for the sake of
Yeah,
workload, I would say.
I understand.
But some things are always better sorted out in person. So yeah, we definitely also do that. But the project management office is the one that does that more like brute force type approach that they go to a lot of the brokerages.
Uh, Now, I want to touch a little bit upon legacy because you are residing in Slovenia,
Mhm.
and to anyone of our age and older, there used to be there used to be an iron wall through the continent, and on the side where you are, there was a plan economy, and there was a system of how was it called, Academy of Sciences or something like this, right? You had
Mhm.
the structure, which was quite rigid as far as the research I did, because this is what I studied
Mhm.
when I was studying myself back in the days in university. Now, and this structure, it's actually what more or less, well, in short, the widening measures, for instance, that the Commission
Yeah.
has made in relation to getting more Eastern European and Southern European beneficiaries into the funding schemes. It's basically trying to breaking this up. What I wanted to say with it, the way that you do things, it's quite modern. It's what I would hear that you would do in Western Europe. So it sort of broke out of a format or a framework that many other research organizations in Eastern Europe maybe struggle a little bit with. But can you share a little bit if it's something that are you aware about in your approach there?
Yeah, I mean, I would say you're absolutely correct about the state of things. Maybe yeah, there is quite some, I would say, modernization going about also elsewhere, but it was definitely an issue, perhaps a bit less in Slovenia than elsewhere. But in general, if you take the Eastern Europe as a kind of, and we do cooperate with Eastern and Southern Europe a lot, there are some challenges there, exactly in terms of kicking off some more competitive practices in some yeah. So in our case it was kind of spontaneous, and as mentioned, there was some let's say history of participation in FP5 to FP7 programs, but this was really modest. But everybody knew that there was this guy at the institute who did European projects, and it was maybe 1 out of 100, and he could tell you something about it, like a wise man. Um, yeah, but I see nowadays. I mean, it's quite a lot of that. So there's a lot of programs, a lot of activities to teach people, to make them competitive. And I don't think just in Slovenia, also elsewhere, for example, Czech Republic or Poland, I've been quite impressed with some of the activities that are underway there. But in some instances, you still see, let's say, kind of average type research, either fundamental or applied, not being stimulated to expand or grow in terms of quality or quantity. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is all like most people who in the research world, they know the research world quite a conservative one. Also, when it comes to the networks you use, the contacts you have, so and it has been an issue that the academic circles of Northwestern Europe has been quite closed, and then there's probably also an element of prejudices about the capacities of Eastern European research, research entities, which is unfounded because they're very, very strong. And this is one of the things that the communist countries, they actually put a lot of funding into the research work. But the practices there are very different from Western Europe. And I think that might be one of the things that has also put a little bit of a cleavage in between the two, no?
Yeah, for sure. It's a kind of vicious circle. I mean, if you think about it. So, I mean, even if you have somebody that's or let's say a group that's quite good, and they don't have the access to, let's say, superb equipment, or they do not tap into the funds that somebody from the West might. It's I would say the publications are not as, at least, in the way we rank them momentarily, are not as good as, for example, some other ones from Western Europe or Central Europe. And, this then, kind of yields replication. So it's more difficult to get projects and so on. So, but I think that, as you've mentioned before, with widening, for example, there are some instruments that allow you to at least kick off your group building, and then, of course, if you're lucky, if you're competent, probably both of these, you kind of get the opportunity to grow. And of course, the possibilities are a bit, sometimes are more limited than somewhere in the Western Europe. But on the other hand, there are also some advantages, such as, for example, for ERC is a typical example because it's a kind of lump sum type approach. I mean, you can hire more people in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, and it's simply a matter of, I think a lot of it is about breaking down the network. Yeah, so getting the foot in and starting to, and then persistently, like you've been doing,
Yes,
in your organization, just get out to those brokerage events, and get foot into those networks, because when they see that the work is professional and well done, then you are hooked up. Then they will contact you also next time. But there it's not different. No, just wanted to touch upon this because it's quite an interesting. It affects some things. This also for people to understand why the Commission has made the initiative of widening to sort of support this. It's been very difficult. Something that has been talked about for decades now. How can we get them more active in Eastern Europe? No. Blaz, let's talk a little bit about your research tracks, and which one of which areas you have benefited most from Horizon Europe and EU funding. So can you share a little bit? So we did on hydrogen storage, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But can you share a little bit? Give us an idea of what actually has where you have benefited the most and how it has helped you.
Well, definitely, I would say that, let's say low carbon economy, meaning, hydrogen, ammonia, e-fuels, renewables, methanol, and everything that entails catalysis in some regard, which is, most of the processes in chemistry, is definitely something that I would mention as the front runner here. And I would say the biggest benefit of this was as we've been aligning the research, so also the fundamental research that we had here with this, let's say, more applicative higher TRLs, and that was a kind of content related alignment that was spearheaded, and then also a kind of more logistic type alignment considering the TRLs, because for an increasing amount of calls, higher TRLs are actually like a prerequisite. So you need to have something that's not really fundamental, it's not really proof of concept, but rather, you have something that can produce some tangible quantities. And yeah, I mean, indeed, anything to do with the green transition is something that has the most alignment with regard to our fundamental research and then also Horizon program.
Yeah. And so what? So can you maybe share a little bit about where you really like took some leaps by using EU funding, like being involved, where it really made a difference?
Yeah, sure. I mean, definitely, CO2 capture and usage was I think probably the first. That was our first substantial project called MEF CO2, and it dealt with capturing CO2 at that point. I mean, nowadays this is a bit outdated, but at that point was capturing the CO2 from a thermal power plant and then converting it to methanol with hydrogen and kind of surplus electricity coming from the grid. This was implemented actually at the second largest thermal power plant near Cologne.
Yeah.
And then this whole CO2 stories kicked off and continued. So that for us was a kind of first wave, and it still continues. I mean, we still do a lot of CO2 related stuff. And then the second was I guess things having to do something with hydrogen and ammonia. I mean, also for example, CO2 conversion to methanol needs hydrogen, but then again, if you're doing ammonia synthesis, you don't need carbon directly. Typically, you just have a bit of it integrated in your overall carbon footprint, which is generally unavoidable. So I would say chemical synthesis in the first wave related to CO2, and now more and more to exclusively hydrogen and ammonia. So let's say non-carbon cycle.
Yeah. What other circular economy elements are you working with?
Quite some of them. So I've mentioned many of them when going through what we do at the department.
Hmm.
But for example, some are simple chemicals which through kind of sectoral coupling also touch upon the energy sector. So
Yeah.
this is the mentioned one: hydrogen, ammonia, CO2, methanol. So let's say simple molecules and bulk chemistries. Then, of course, there's polymers, or the new plastics economy, as it's called. And here, what we do is looking into the bio-based stories, so bio-based
Ah,
materials and chemicals. But nowadays, bio-based is not enough. It has to be also
circular.
re- circular, meaning
Yeah.
recyclable by design. And in recent years, we have quite some projects on a paradigm called SSBD. It's called Safe and Sustainable by Design,
Yeah.
and it means that you're basically integrating the paramount sustainability, but not just sustainability, also, for example, toxicity elements in designing the materials themselves.
Mhm.
And this, of course, will be different over the value chains, but it is something that's becoming important for chemical industry, for other sectors as well. And yeah, that I would say so. Biorefining, bioeconomy, and new plastics economy are also quite important fields.
The last one being a big thing, huh? Because like exchanging of plastics into bioplastic stuff like this. That's really where you can like use your capacities, I guess.
Yeah.
Let me remind you, because we've been involved in different proposals together. One of them got funding, and you're still rolling that, the Hystrom. But before, let's just move into the concrete projects. So the Hystrom,
Mhm.
how's that going?
Well, quite well, I would say. So that's the project which kind of very concretely deals with various, let's say, challenges of decentralized ammonia. Nowadays, I mean, 3% of world's energy demand is churned up by ammonia synthesis. And I mean, if you look at ammonia, it's also a carrier for hydrogen. You need to do something about shifting the paradigm of ammonia as it is produced right now. And this means that you need to, make the operating conditions milder. You need to do scale down actually instead of scale up. And this means that you need new materials, you need new type of process operations. For example, you need process intensification by trying to avoid ammonia recycling loop as much as possible. And yeah, I mean, none of these processes are actually like commercialized, but the TRLs are increasing gradually over the years because there's not that many things that we can do as an economy or as a society, because we're limited by the thermodynamics typically and by economics on the other hand. So how much money we actually have to invest, and there's a limited number of things that we can do. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And hydrogen is, of course, one of the big things coming in the horizon. Hopefully, because it's extremely sustainable, but it's very high energy intensive to develop. Yeah,
Yeah, and this
uh,
means also costly. That's the most
exactly.
yeah.
But what can you shortly explain in like in a nutshell the project, what it is about?
You mean Hystrom?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, here, as mentioned, the core idea is to make ammonia synthesis decentralized, which means that you can go about this by doing a kind of intensified processing, meaning that you are let's say, removing the need to have extremely well thermally integrated process. Meaning that, for example, you look at the things that are complex, for example, high temperature of operation, high pressure of operation, in extreme thermal integration of various processes. And then, of course, this drags everything along. So instead of recycling reactor, you have multi-tube reactors, which kind of operate semi-continuously. Instead of having just catalytic beds, you have a catalyst with sorbents. The instead of having a reactor powered up by a natural gas furnace, the idea is to have the electrification, and generally the electrification of chemical industry is quite relevant today.
yeah.
And of course they call it as is very known, the twin transition, so digitalization.
Mm.
So these processes are inherently dynamic, which means that you need to tame these dynamics, and this means that you need to predict, simulate, and then also optimize the processes and materials at various scales.
Yeah. And so this consortium, it's quite
Mhm.
cool. It's quite cool, no?
Yeah.
As far as I remember, I managed to facilitate ThyssenKrupp into that.
Yes, they're a
Yeah.
partner indeed.
Casale, which also a big player in this
Yes.
area, and Johnson Matt.
Yes, as a catalyst provider. Yeah.
Yeah.
So typically, I mean, as the more you have your let's say supply and value chain covered, the I mean, it's better, of course, for the success rate of the proposal, because there is validity behind what you are trying to showcase. And the second thing is that there's also more. The results are typically better because these guys will steer you in a way with regard to things that are worth investigating, things that,
Yeah,
and of course some would have no economical future. Yeah.
yeah, and I remember very well that Johnson Matthey was extremely focused on saying we only go where we know that it's following our business strategy here, innovation strategy. And that it's a private company, it's like this, But it's absolutely perfectly correct that they do have this focus. But I guess that's what made them big. Other projects that you're proud of that you stepped into, and anything else you want to mention here?
Well, I mean, definitely MEF-CO2, which was one of our first and biggest projects. So that one was definitely a game changer for the department, not just me. And nowadays we have some where we are cooperating with industrial partners, with which we also cooperate directly. For example, Ecoduct with Total Energies. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we don't have more in the rundown, but has all this work that you're doing with EU funding, has that given you good, also maybe bilateral collaborations with industry? So synergy things that like a spin-off.
Well, I mean, definitely yes. I mean, because that gives you an opportunity to show or validate yourself as a reliable partner at like little to no cost to industry. That's always a good test bed for industry to see how you work. And then, I mean, if they're satisfied, they're also prepared to put some money into you in this regard. I mean, yes, so definitely it is beneficial. It does more good than harm.
Yeah. And staying a little bit on that line, did you manage did you manage to grow in like persons, employees in the institute due to your engagement and focus on new funding?
Yes, of course. I mean, and not just modestly so, but substantially. So, for example, EU funding is now procuring maybe for a third to a half of the department for sure.
Uh,
So yeah, it's a big help and it's a big replicator. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess, and that's always what that's a discourse of mine, but it's a discourse that everybody discovers when they actually tap into this, is that the more you do this, the easier it is. So the first years that can be a little rough, but when you start to have been through projects where you're invited again and so on, then it starts to be a little less rough to get into the right winning projects. No.
Yeah, I like how you said little less rough.
Yeah, it's always rough. Yeah, because it's also I didn't finish a sentence, but the way we know each other, that's what I wanted to finish off with. Your collaboration with consultancy companies. So we know each other because I was working for a consultancy company, and you were understanding very well the business model that I was running with when I connected with you.
Mhm.
Where we would basically say, look, if you come with the idea, then there's only a success fee, so you don't have to have a down payment, and then we do it together. That's your payment, and the rest will each pay a fee also. So that business model was fitting perfectly with you, and this is why we sort of got a collaboration going. But how else do you work with private consultancy companies? Do you have ones that you once in a while engage with, or how does it work for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's again like the proposals all over the spectrum. So, typically it's always an individual decision that you make based on the offer that you get. But it's a market economy, meaning that the consultancies or the partners that are better will typically also require or demand more, which means that either direct payment and or then
Mhm.
success fee. But it's always it's a trade-off. So you have to decide, because sometimes if you don't pay for something, then you also cannot have it. I mean, so sometimes
Yeah.
it is a high quality service. So it's I would say a matter of experience and kind of personal judgment with regard to whether the offer is good enough. But
Yeah.
in most cases it works well, I would say. So it's a reasonable business model. Yeah.
But you also know very well, Blaz, that you have for some calls, especially specific calls within chemical industry here, it's quite narrow. The Hystrom, that call, that was quite narrow, right? And there you don't have that many consortia approaching it. And then within the sector, you will know who you need to be together with. And if you realize then that the guys that you need to be with, they are running with a consultant, well, I guess from your side you would say, okay, that's the place to be. So we'll need to dig a little bit into our pockets.
For sure, I wouldn't think twice.
Exactly, because you know that it's likely to go home and
Yes.
The Grand. No, Blaz, I promise you it to be short. We don't have to talk much longer. It's thanks for sharing a little bit how you work with these things. Now,
Yeah.
I have my segment that I always have, the toughest challenge. So the toughest challenge for you and your team to work with EU funding. What's that?
Oh,
Time resource. What?
well, yes, for sure. But I think that the challenges will change over time. It depends. So sometimes the challenges are getting the projects, sometimes the challenges will be maintaining the stream of projects, and sometimes the challenges would be, once you have the projects, how to actually manage them. So it's I would say it varies over time, and I've been through all these cycles that I have noted now.
Yeah, it's both you and me. We know that we know how it is. That it's you have some rough parts, but and sometimes it shifts. So yeah, but it's I guess maybe you were there when you sort of started it off, with more focus on EU funding.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, this is, yeah,
The beginning is always rough.
yes, it is.
Yeah. All right, Blaz, that's it. I'm just gonna wrap up the episode, and then before we say goodbye to the listeners. So, dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed this rather shorter episode of the grant on with focus on chemistry research and EU funding. Go and check the rest of my episodes on thegrant.eu. There's a good, solid back catalog now at my site. So there should be something for your interest. And while you're in there, don't forget to subscribe to the email list. This spells currency in the podcast world. So please, by all means, if you have any sympathy with what I'm doing, subscribe to that. And finally, if you want to get on the train, on the Grant train, then connect with me on LinkedIn. This is where the fun happens. This is where the flow goes on a day-to-day basis, where I share stuff, like stuff, and comment on all you guys out there, the things that you share, tapping into what's going on in the EU funding world. So that's that. Blaz, again, thanks.
Thank you.
And we'll stay in touch. But let's say goodbye to the dear listeners. Bye.
Bye.